Well, it looks like we got about 3.5 to the cabin. This is going to be a good day for the virtual hike, I think. Or maybe even for...
Looks like the old road bed was down through there.
Phill, this is probably just an old sled road, and I'm pretty sure that they used oxen and horses in the lake and kind of pulled everything up through here. Looks like we're coming into some nice sunlight here. Oh yeah, you can see the sun cutting up through here. Look at that.
Listen to those birds singing.
Yep.
It's pretty sound. And
yeah, so this is Curry's right here.
here on the left.
Yep, right here on the left. And this is probably one of the more complete chimneys. One of the more complete chimneys on the trail, except for Perfect Chimney up there.
That's really nice.
And we'll stop there too. But yeah, there's hardly a stone missing on that one. And if you come here in the early spring, there's a lot of, not a lot, but some flowers that are blooming. I think it's part of their garden. Can you believe that? It's been.
Can you connect the Curry family to Caudill family?
Not directly. No. They've always said that his name was Samuel. His name was Thomas Samuel Curry, and they called him Sam Curry. And they say he was one of the millwrights up at the grist mill.
Where were the corners?
Well, you know, I'm kind of making it up, but there's like a rock wall right here that you can see. So looks like they excavated right there. And then I'm pretty sure if you look around in here, you'll see a rock corner. Is that it?
Well, that's not the corner, but that is a rock.
Yeah.
That's part of the foundation.
I'm pretty sure this one was a rock corner right here.
This is probably it. That's
so
part.
This might have been this. Yeah, stand right there.
Right here?
Yep. So that's a pretty good sized cabin right there.
Oh, that's a good sized cabin.
That's a big one. So I'm pretty sure that they probably got their water right down there at the creek. And then, have you seen this big flat area back here?
No.
I think this is probably, if it was me, this is where I'd have put my garden. I don't see any really big trees. See a bunch of old stuff, but this is nice and flat and fertile. Look at this. It doesn't get any nicer than that. Can you imagine?
Oh, this is perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect.
This is beautiful, grassed area.
Yep.
I've never seen this before.
Yep. Yep, absolutely gorgeous.
Wow.
I can imagine some headstones in here someplace. Watch where you're walking, dude.
That's why I got this.
There's a little creek back here too.
That might be where they got the water from. That's the creek.
Yep, there's a little spring back here.
Because you want to get it out of a spring.
Yep. I'll bet you if you cut right back up in there, you'd find a spring head.
I wish there was grass growing like this at Caudill cabin.
Yep.
That would keep the undergrowth down. See, there's no undergrowth in here.
Yep.
Because this keeps it smothered out, the saplings. There's only one right there.
I'll bet you're right. I bet you if you go right back up in there, you'll find a spring head. If I understand it correctly, what they typically did was, if you were, let's say you were building a cabin, Phill, you'd get all your logs on the ground. You do that kind of by yourself. And then when it came time to put the walls up, all the neighbors would get together and do what, you know, basically a barn raising, right?
Yeah.
And get your walls up for you. And then you'd finish the roof by yourself. But I think like the, you know, doing the stack foundations and dropping the trees and getting them all ready, I think that's something you do by yourself, and then the neighbors would get together and help you get the logs up. Because I don't know of any other way to do it. So this is one of the millstones from what I guess was a grist mill, and we never did find the second one. But I would just have to assume that this got washed down as part of the flood because the mill site's about a mile up the trail. I know it's hard to believe that the water would carry something that big and heavy a mile, but I believe that's what the situation is. And it's like you were saying, it looks like the center of this thing is round, and it's got almost like a keyway in it where you would kind of lock something in place to keep it from. Yeah, there's another one right there, to keep it from spinning on the shaft. And that's exactly what they did. I bet you it was kind of like a cross like this that went through the shaft itself to keep it from spinning. That's really interesting.
More than 3 miles I keep crossing this old creek. Hearing all that water makes me want to take a leak. They say the cabin's just up around the bend. Sometimes I think, boys, this hike will never end. And we're gonna Caudill cabin, we're gonna make it look real fine. Cutting those weeds, Phill says, back to the tree line. Lenny knows all the history. He's done his research on his family tree. He says there's graves up there on that hill, folks that the flood of 1916 didn't kill. And we're gonna Caudill cabin, we're gonna make it look real fine. Cutting those weeds, Phill says, back to the tree line. We're gonna Caudill cabin, we're gonna make it look real fine. Cutting those weeds, Phill says, back to the tree line.
There's some mountain laurel over there. Think we ought to get him some mountain laurel? But the Boy Scouts put this fence back up. It's been probably 5 years now. What I'd like to do is come up here and get this tree out of the way. So you see the footstone back there?
I see it.
Yeah. So this is Alvis Blevins, and it says he was born in 1833 and died in 1908, aged 75 years. And then this symbol up the top is just a hand with the finger pointing straight up. And I don't know if that's associated with an organization or not. Sometimes different organizations had different symbols that they would put on their tombstones. So the fence was put back right after we did our family cemetery fence, and a Boy Scout troop 250 out of Hickory. They're the same ones that did our cemetery fence. They came back up here after the fact and put the fence back up. Dragged these 4 posts up and the spool wire and put a fence back up around it. Yep, I'm real grateful to them. They did a lot of good work for us.
On one of our trail maintenance days, that Reggie Caudill and Randall Foster was with us. We only had a trim saw. Didn't know we was going to run into something like this. But we managed to get it out of the trail with just a trim saw and roll it over there out of the way with these logs here. Stuck under it and just rolled it over.
This is old man Harrison's place. Coming up right up here, right down there. He lived here for, oh my gosh, forever. I really do believe he, huh?
That's our great-grandfather.
Great, yep. 22 children. Had
2 different wives.
2 different wives, actually 3 wives, but he had 2 wives and had 22, and they were sisters. Mary Tilley and Sarah Tilley. But if you're standing right where I'm at and look straight back down in this way, you can see one of his chimneys, and we'll go. We'll wander down there and take a look at it because I always like being down there. I kind of feel connected to it. But back to Lon Leatherland, he said that it was a board building, that it wasn't really a log building, it was a board building.
And contrary to a lot of people's belief, he didn't move out in 1916. He stayed here.
Right.
He didn't move out. I'll go and throw this back to you.
Okay.
I only seen
I think
one.
I'm going to be okay.
Okay, all right. I only seen one really slick one.
Got my waterproof socks on. So I'll just stomp right through it. When
You say that's one
when
of
I
two
first
chimneys?
well, the first time I ever found this place was remember I was telling you about Lon Leatherland? He and I were talking about it, and he said he thought he knew where it was at. But anyway, I got an email from him, and he says, I found Harrison's cabin. And I said, well, where is it? I said, I thought it was lost. And he replied back, and he said, no, it wasn't lost. He said, it's right where he left it. And I really got a kick out of that. I thought that was hilarious. But this is apparently, so the first time I came down here was Easter Sunday in 2004. So it hasn't been quite 20 years ago. 19 years ago is when I first found this. And then I guess one of these was a living room chimney, and one of these was a kitchen chimney. And then he said that he thought it was a board building, that it was not a log cabin. All right, so this is Harrison Caudill's cabin, and Harrison was our great-great-grandfather. And he had, in total, he had 22 kids. So he married Mary Tilley about 1860, and then he married, and she died in about 1871, having her 6th child. And then what I believe is that her sister Sarah came in to help him with the kids and just never left. And then she had 16 kids, so that's 22 in total. 22 kids in total. Yep.
But now he remarried again after she passed.
Yeah. So Sarah passed about 1912, before the flood, 1912, and then he married a lady by the name of Alpha Wagner. Yep.
How long did she live?
She outlived him because he died in 24, and when he was deeding the property to, you remember George Washington Caudill? They called him Shorty the Midget, right? He put a clause in there that said that she could live on the property as long as she didn't let her family come live on it. He said if her family shows up, all the bet's off and she can't live here anymore.
But now he continued to live here after the flood. A lot of things you see on YouTube says everybody moved out.
I think
but that's not true.
It's absolutely clear that he did not move out.
He stayed.
Correct. Now, did he stay here or did he go to a different cabin? Because this is kind of low land and the creek's right there. So when that flood came through, he had to be right in the way. I just don't see any way that he wasn't in the way.
So you don't know if the 16 flood took this cabin out or not?
It's a possibility. It's all speculation. But given how low it is, and I mean, you can see a creek bed right there. You have to believe that this thing took a punch when the flood came through. So this one's, I think this was probably Harrison's brother Ruffin's cabin. And the only reason is because when I looked at all the land grants, there's a 33-acre tract that's kind of shaped like a letter C. And this cabin falls right onto that. And then this one's interesting to me, not only because of the wash tub and the basins and stuff, but I'm standing on a piece of log right now that used to be his side rail for his cabin. And then if you stand on that one over there, that was the other one, Phil.
That's another one.
Yeah.
That there's the
And there's the corner,
corner.
and there's the corner. So you know exactly where the cabin was at. Okay, so this is a Caudill cemetery that's not, I don't know, it's probably 25 or 30 yards off the trail. Not too many folks even know about it. But Thomas Matthew Caudill was Harrison's younger brother, and his son was named Joseph. They called him Joe, and his middle name was Dow. Whether it was D-O-W-E-L-L or D-O-W is up for grabs, but Joe's cabin was down that way a little ways, and we're going to try to find that. But according to the Park Service maps, when they took this property in the mid-30s, there are 5 graves here. So this is one, and Phil's standing near one, and I'm not sure where the other 3 are at. But
this was probably one.
yeah, that's probably one. And if you come here in the early spring, all these flowers are blooming, and it's been planted. I think I have some photographs from this spring when we were here, and that looks like one. How many is that? 4? And this could possibly be one as well, so that would be probably the 5th. But I have no idea who's buried here. Absolutely no idea. I doubt we'll ever know. But it's really kind of neat just to find a cemetery up in the woods, just kind of remote, and you'd walk right by it unless you knew it was a cemetery. You wouldn't even know it was here. So who knows? Future generations may or may not keep track of it. Well, at least we did. So this was really an interesting cabin for me. Because it's so close to the big waterfall. I mean, I would just love the idea of living next to that waterfall. What did you find, Phil? That's cast iron. So, Harrison had a brother, Thomas, a younger brother, who lived up in here for a while. Thomas actually owned a 44-acre tract up here that was the mill site. And so this was his son's cabin. His name was Joseph. They called him Joe, and his middle name was Dow. And then, so this is Reggie's great-grandfather. Yep.
It's like Martin's our great-grandfather.
He'd be Martin's cousin.
Yeah, Martin, him be first cousins.
Right. Okay, so when we do this next creek crossing, we'll be on Thomas Matthews' property, the 44-acre tract. And this is, our uncle told us that this was the old molasses mill. And this is a flume right here. And the way it would work is they would have a mule or a horse down there in what used to be a clearing right there. And he'd walk in a big circle and they'd grind it. And then I think it might have been sorghum. I'm not really sure what they were using exactly, but it's probably sorghum. And then they would bring all the mash up here and they would boil it down. And so all these rocks that you see right here, let me see your picker here for a minute.
I didn't clear it out.
Clear it out.
I didn't know if they wanted to do
But
that.
this was the old flume where they would boil everything down, and at least that's what we were told. That's what this was, this whole rock structure here. And that's where the horse or the mule would be, and would walk in a circle between the two wheels. I've never walked down there to see if there's any wheels down there. We ought to do that someday. There might be a stone laying down there. Now, let's go ahead and cross the creek and go over to Thomas's. There's a nice flat just as we cross the creek. So Phill, all this flat land on your left is where the mill would have been. Mill site right here. It'd be worthwhile just to walk up in the creek and see what you could see. So it's pretty easy to imagine that this is all cleared out, and you can see that there's several rock piles, kind of like this one over here on the left, Phill, where it looked like they were clearing the field. And I just have to imagine that the mill itself was down here someplace. Because in all the old documents that I see going back to the late 1700s, they're talking about this being the mill site. And this is some property that Thomas owned that he purchased, I think. Purchased it from the Krauses, I believe it was. But there are several big rock piles here. And I'm sure at one point this was a pretty productive area. And then this is Thomas's house. This is his 44-acre tract. And this is a double chimney. Never been really sure how that worked. Whether there was one really big cabin with one really big roof pitch, or if it was almost like a dog trot. Just not sure. And Thomas was the youngest of the three brothers. Harrison was the oldest, and then Ruffin, and then Thomas. But where I'm standing, you can see where the rocks fell from the chimney, so it must have had some height to it. That's for sure. And then this one over here. Does this one seem to be leaning more than usual to you? Has it always leaned that much?
I don't know. I don't remember.
And yep. Yep. So, and I'm thinking this might have been a corner right back down here. There's a stack right here. Looks like it could have been a corner stack. And then
there's a corner over there.
Yeah, and over here again. Yeah. Careful of that one. That one's really slickery. I think the waterfalls are absolutely amazing.
Beautiful up here.
A lot of times you don't pay attention to how many of them there are till you stop and really pay attention, you know what I mean? Walk right by them. So this is one of the last chimneys before we get up to the Caudill cabin, and it wasn't 2 years ago, maybe 3, that this thing was standing, and we have photographs of it while it was still standing. And this right here was the lintel stone that went to the firebox. And Phill, I think you're standing down by one of the corners.
Here's one of the logs.
And that's a sill log right there. And I'm sure that was a sill log right over there. Yeah, and I often wondered if maybe this wasn't Grandpa's cabin, but again, I don't have any idea. I don't really know. I haven't been able to figure it out completely. But I'm just supposing that this was a corner. right back here. But you know, it's been pointed out that you know, that's why the preservation of these things is so important, because you never know what storm is going to take out what chimney. It's kind of like that that perfect chimney down there. I'm sure we'll come up here someday and find out that that thing is toppled too. So yeah, getting all of this recorded is kind of important, at least it is to me. So this is probably my favorite spot in the whole trail. We call it Jacuzzi Rock, because waterfall comes down and hits that little pond down there. And that hole right there is about 4 feet deep, even though you can't tell. Coming up here real soon. How'd you like to live up here? Well, Phil, we made it.
Home again.
Home again. It's kind of pretty with all these
It's beautiful.
white flowers. I don't know what they are.
They look like briars.
That's black.
That makes blackberries.
Yeah, I think those are blackberries.
Yeah, that's what it is, blackberry briars.
We might want to let them be.
Okay. Growed up.
Well, I mean, it used to be a poplar, and that used to be all overgrown. We've cleared it out pretty substantially.
Oh yeah.
Used to be all kinds of saplings in here.
They'll be back. Wish Chester was with us.
You think we could get up here and clear some of this out without getting tore up by bees?
Bees is what bothers me more than anything else. I don't know if they've started nesting or not.
Yeah.
I do not know that.
Yep.
They will put a halt to what we're doing.
Oh man, there are all kinds of nice flowers. So we finally made it up to the cabin, and you could see how remote it is. It took us about, I don't know, it took us about 3 hours to get up here. It's about 3 miles, I would say, 3.5 miles. And so this is where Martin and Jannie lived. Martin and Jannie Caudill.
Our great grandfather.
Great grandparents. Yep.
Grandmother.
And Jannie was a Blevins, and Martin was Harrison's 8th child. He was the 2nd child of the 2nd marriage. And so, you know, it's not clear. It's not completely clear to me when they built the cabin and when they lived in the cabin, because there's some contradictory information. But by all accounts, they were married in about 1894, and they had 14 kids. And so our grandfather, Lenny Feynman, who I'm named after, was the oldest of the 14 kids, and he was born in 1895. And then I know they spent some time up in Green Cove, right where the Creeper Trail is in Green Cove, Virginia, working for the railroad, and then back down here. And so it's not clear to me if they owned this property back in the 1890s or if it was acquired after that in you know, around 1910 or so.
And they were pretty much self-sufficient. They grew crops here. There was some stuff that they had to get, go to the store to purchase, but it was 8 miles to the nearest store by horseback. So it was it's not like running down to the local convenience store. They didn't get to the store too often, and they traded on the stuff that they raised here for the goods that they needed at the store. And there were other buildings besides this one on the property whenever they lived here, and this was all cleared, so they had cropland. But they were up here to themselves. They had neighbors they could go to, but not real close. It was kind of spread out. There was a school down at the primitive campground, and there's a church there and a school. But it was a pretty good walk to school.
It's been a couple of decades, but there used to be an apple tree right out here.
Oh yeah, there used to be an apple tree there.
Yep.
But no telling what this looked like, because they had barns for the cattle, and they probably had chickens and pigs, and you know, they was, like I said before, pretty much self-sufficient right here in this plot of land.
I would imagine there was a spring house someplace or the other,
Yeah, to keep stuff cold.
but I've never found it. I have no idea where it was at.
It would be up there somewhere, where that spring's at, over there in the holler.
All right, so this is a photograph of Martin Caudill family, and it was clearly taken sometime probably between 1905 and maybe 1910. And so this is Martin and his wife Jannie, and this is our grandfather. He's the oldest of the 14 kids. His name is Lenny. And then this is Bessie, and she ended up living up in Green Cove. She got married and lived right up there. And then over here is James Lonnie. He went by Lonnie. And this is Harrison McKinley, which is one of my grandfather's other brothers. He ended up living up in Whitehead his entire life. And this little fella right here, his name is Cornelius, and he's one of the people that was killed in the flood. He was living in Lenny's house when the flood came along, and he got killed. The baby right here is Edna, and so looks like she's less than a year old. So we can figure out what year the photograph was taken based upon her age. And there's Phoebe and Kester Mack. So that's a really good, strong photograph of the family back in the early 1900s. Year-old. But based upon all of that, I would suppose that this is probably taken up in Green Cove, because Martin and his father-in-law, Janie's dad, his name was James Harvey Blevins. They're known to be working for the company up there. They were building the railroad at that time, and I know from Lenny's journal that he was unloading cars up there. And he and his uncle, so they would go up there for work and come back and forth between Basin Cove and Green Cove, trying to make a living, trying to squeeze out a living. All right, well, you were curious about how many people may have lived here at any one time. So if we just think about the period of, let's say, 1910, okay? And, at this picture is, they had 14 kids. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 of them here. So if they had 10 or 11 kids in 1910, that means that there were 12 people living here. Yeah.
In a cabin?
17 foot square.
1,700, how many, 17?
17 foot square.
Oh, 17 foot square.
Yeah.
Yeah, one room.
With 12 people.
No.
Yeah.
Close quarters.
Yeah, you better like each other.
You don't have much privacy.
Yeah. And can you imagine having to make a couple, 3 meals a day on that little fireplace?
No.
And somebody's got to go get the wood, and somebody's got to go clean the dishes, and somebody's got to go get the water, and you got to go to the bathroom outside, and
somebody's out here working in the fields, in the crops, and
Yep.
feeding the cattle and the livestock.
Yep. And the only place to get water is right down there in that creek. Yeah, that's quite the lifestyle. After 1916, the cabin pretty much sat vacant, and then it was sold to Harrison in August of 1916. When they left, they sold it back to the old man, and then subsequently he passed away in 1924, and most or all of his property went to one of his kids. His name was George Washington Caudill, and he had a birth defect, and he was just a really small man. And but George took care of his father through the end of his life, and the old man left him all the property as part of that agreement. And then the property was acquired by the Park Service in the mid-30s. Between the mid-30s and early 40s, the Park Service was buying up all of the land that became Doughton Park, which was about 6,000 acres. And so that's how the property ultimately ended up in the Park Service. The Park Service has been a good steward for the property, and we're very grateful to them for preserving our heritage and making it here so other folks can enjoy it too. You know, part of what we're doing today is trying to provide an opportunity to those folks who can't make the 3.5-mile walk, so that they can get to see it and appreciate it and understand it. Yep. Well, we really hope you've enjoyed your virtual hike, and glad you could join us today. If you do manage to make it up here, if you just be so kind to make sure you keep the door locked so that we don't get any critters inside, we'd appreciate that. And thanks for joining us. I think we need to come back and get some black bears.
Gonna Caudill cabin, we're gonna make it look real fine. Cutting those weeds, Phill says, back to the tree line. Lenny knows all the history. He's done his research on his family tree. He says there's graves up there on that hill, folks that the flood of 1916 didn't kill. And we're gonna Caudill cabin, we're gonna make it look real fine. Cutting those weeds, Phill says, back to the tree line. We're gonna Caudill cabin, we're gonna make it look real fine. Cutting those weeds, Phill says, back to the tree line.